They call me microphone face. We're here to talk about bread, lettuce, cheese, dead presidents, green.
It's just money, man. It's just money.
Hi, welcome to It's Just Money. You've got your doctor,
Dr. Matt Anderson, PhD in psychology.
your creative,
Raul Contreras, filmmaker and designer.
and I'm Jared Stafis, an entrepreneur with a master's in personal finance. Ultimately, this podcast is about people and their relationship with money.
On today's episode, we have Jack Kynion. Awesome to have him as our first guest. Jack is a financial advisor and lawyer with Legacy Advisory. Jack, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a second generation financial advisor. My dad started Legacy Advisory. It was the family business.
Okay.
I took a break and went to law school at the University of Kansas for 3 years.
Right.
Got my legal training. I'm a member of the bar in the state of Kansas. And then came back and have been doing the full-time advisory business for 7 years now. At Legacy Advisory, we're a wealth management firm, which basically means, in the simplest terms, that we do both financial planning and investment management.
Right.
A lot of firms either do financial planning or they do investment management. If you do both and you try to have a view into every aspect of your client's financial life, they call that wealth management.
Okay.
So a little bit of my story.
That's helpful to know. Now, you said you're second generation.
That's right.
So one of the questions I was kind of thinking is, what is one of your earliest memories about how you understand money?
My dad was an entrepreneur, so one of the earliest memories I have. Do you guys remember back in the 90s, a lot of video games demos got sent out on CD and got mailed to houses? This was like a direct marketing.
Mm-hmm.
One came, I think I was in third grade, and I happened to be at my dad's office that day, and one came, and I was trying to make it work, and I didn't understand how to work. And I go, the game was called Entrepreneur, and I was like, Dad, what's an entrepreneur? And he goes, entrepreneur? And he looks at the guy that he was having a meeting with, who was also an entrepreneur, and he said, son, an entrepreneur is an idiot. And I think that's probably
your clients.
Yeah.
Way better definition than mine.
Yeah.
Identify and describe a memory where you kind of started to understand
That money existed.
as value. And like, it wasn't just a thing.
This I actually have. I know exactly what it was, and it wasn't my dad, which is surprising because I had a close relationship with my dad, and a lot of lessons come from him. But it was my mother's father, so my maternal grandfather, decided when I was 5 or 6 that he was going to start sending me $10 as an allowance in the mail a month. And my parents, I didn't have an allowance for my parents, whatever. So this was like, it was a foreign concept to me. I had heard about it from other kids, but he made a deal with me. He said, at Christmas time, however much money you've saved, I will give you that amount more. So I think it was the number I have in my head is I saved 77 of the $120 that he sent to me that year. And he was like super excited about it because like his lesson had worked. Mm-hmm. But I think that's probably my earliest memory.
I would have borrowed $1,000.
Jared's on margin here. Yeah.
Super leverage.
He's the only 7-year-old with a banker.
I really need $2,000 now. Pay back my high interest rate debt.
So like, I guess that along with the rest of what I learned growing up from my dad about money was, don't let money be a limitation. So I think that understanding that whatever money conversations you have here is against the backdrop of America.
That we are more willing to exchange our time for money.
Our time, our energy, our efforts, our stress levels, our everything, right? And it's led to a lot of prosperity. Right. So that's definitely one of the main inputs into prosperity in America is the hard work, is the exchanging of time for that stuff. It's just not the only way to necessarily look at things.
Yeah, that's the water we're swimming in, so we're used to it.
Exactly.
So being able to think critically about that may be helpful.
So that can lead to different things for different people. So one personality might, since it's the water they swim in, see that as all of life. This happens a lot, and it happens, see it happen with people and manifest in a lot of different ways. It's stereotypical at this point, but I think it still happens, and because people have a very difficult time viewing themselves from the outside, it's often, call it undiagnosed. But people do buy stuff because they have money available, and the act of buying something keeps them moving down the path they're going, because it's like a little bit of almost like a drug, right? Like you just get a little shot of something positive, and then you start feeling negative again. And then you have money available but maybe the reason that you have the negative feelings in the first place are because of the way you're getting the money.
Okay.
Right. Because it could be the job, or it could be or not having
or
a proper relationship with money. If you think of your life as money, which I think a lot of people end up doing at their base. I think as a baseline for all of this stuff, it's important to understand that dreams and concepts and expectations are all a function of your starting point. As humans, I think I've seen that a lot in my practice. But if you think about like someone that lives in an agrarian society can literally not have the same dream as someone who is in a modern society with a lot of access to capital and opportunity and so on and so forth, because their brains literally can't imagine the same things because of what. So their concept of a dream is going to be different. So I think that because not everybody in America has exactly the same circumstances, it's good for us to see the American dream manifest differently for different people.
So your American dream.
So that said, what I would say is between working with clients, because I work with clients across the wealth and income spectrum, and I think the American dream has to have, for me at least, has to have a really strong amount of freedom. I think that's the distinction between America and a lot of other places. And a lot of times that ends up working out because freer markets tend to produce more capital, which tends to produce more total wealth for a society. Freedom can lead to money, but it's not money itself.
Right. Your American dream.
So, for myself?
Yes.
Okay. I think my American dream actually mirrors the successful lives of a lot of my clients too. And essentially what that is you get your life set up in such a way that you have some margin at the end of the month. And so the happier people, the correlation between what they actually have, like the house, the car, the whatever, the income, and how much they're fulfilling their American dream. It's not about the gross numbers. It's more about what is the net at the end of the month. So if you can live at 10% below your means, so that there is something you're contributing towards the future, able to stay in the present. And then I think with a lot of that, a lot of those people end up getting to disengage with money, regardless of the amount. There's a certain minimum amount you got to have. Right. And it just is. And a lot of people don't have it. And so they're going to be stressed. But if you can get to the point, and this is for me too, if you can get to the point that you have met a minimum benchmark on your income so that you can stop worrying about it. And then you can just focus on what it is that you're good at and then can bring to the world, because you're not spending so much of your time and your energy trying to solve these other problems that are just basically not enough. I think that's the American dream, is that you have a shot to get there. It takes a long time. I think it should take a long time, but that there can be a path towards getting to that. And that kind of comes back into like why I think profit is good. Actually, I want to address this really quick. We live in a capitalist society, right? What that means is you need to acquire capital. Everybody has the ability to acquire capital. All it is just savings over a long period of time that eventually produces a profit for you. And the way that people's retirements are structured is I get enough capital that I essentially am able to pay myself a salary on a perpetual basis, no matter how long I live. That's what a lot of people are doing, right? So if you can get to the point, it's not a moral absolute, but if you can get to the point that you've built a capital stack, call it retirement, call it a savings account, whatever you want to call it, so that you can fund, right? You have a financing source for the things you're going to do with your time anyways. That might be a fun dream. Right now, you're making 90% of what you need to make. Whatever you're doing to make the next thing, because you're not contributing to that future. And that just means you're 10% short and you've decided it's okay. That's where I'm going to cut from.
Hey, you've got money questions. We've got money answers. It's Just Money Live is coming up. Check out our Facebook page for details. Make sure you don't miss your opportunity to participate. All right, we'll see you then. The idea that you can make more than your means, have a margin, save to the future, and kind of build a lifestyle that you prefer. So
yeah, but I think that the lifestyle part of it is like, that's an expectations question. And people have a tremendous amount of influence on their own expectations. So you can get there both ways. You know, they're the famous research studies where they correlate income to happiness.
Sure.
Right. Which is a notoriously difficult thing to measure anyways, but assuming that it has some validity. Right. I think we
don't like assumptions here.
I think on an inflation adjusted basis, like the nominal is probably around 75 or 80,000 a year in family income. So median income in the United States is around 60. That's like the middle point. But I think 75 or 80 is where you hit peak happiness. So you're getting happier all the way up, probably on average. Not everybody. I know a lot of people that have very little money that are the best people and the happiest people and contribute the most to society.
Which is speaking to your expectations and your
Absolutely.
own mental view.
When you say expectations, do you mean like when you have car problems or when you have bills to pay and like where you're not stressed about paying those kinds of things? Or
being stressed about that sort of thing, right, is there's a value system there, right? So I'm stressed about this thing for maybe a practical purpose. I can't use my car. Well, there are practical solutions. There is public transit. There are other things you can. I've done this before. You can actually do quite a bit of walking. But then there's the social expectation of if I can't pay the thing I'm expected to pay, then that makes me a bad person, right? Some people get to the point where like, wait, that's dumb.
So you find that people who can't pay bills, that's a common theme. I mean, that's what we're trying to pull from for sure, that they might feel bad or as if they've done something wrong because they don't have the money.
And I think that I think that a lot of people do feel bad because they don't have the money, but it doesn't seem to correlate very much to how much money they have coming in. There's not, and this is personal experience, right? I'm not a living study, but I've dealt with a lot of people and their money. There doesn't seem to be a strong correlation between the amount of money somebody has coming in and the way they feel about whether or not they can pay their bills, and there's stress there. So that's why the expectations game, I think, is such an important thing, is because it doesn't matter if they're making 40,000. I've seen them both ways, or 400,000.
We definitely threw some things out there that I want to unpack for other people too. Mm-hmm. The research in a nutshell says for every dollar somebody makes more, they achieve more happiness on a happiness scale. So there's no real connection. This is just correlation.
Right.
And what they found was, as they interviewed people, was that as they made more money, that dollars in the beginning made a lot more of an impact into how much more happy they became. But what we have is a climbing chart, and then we hit $75,000, and it's like, and again, family income, which is defined as all income. So if there's a husband and wife and they each make $35,000, they're at $70K. When they hit 75 as a couple or as a family, they start to plateau. You still get happier as you earn more money. And what was most interesting is as they go up for each dollar, it plateaus farther, and to the point where it starts making very small impact in their lives. And what was even more fascinating with the research was that after plateauing for long enough, at about 150, 175.
Yeah, I thought it was 200.
Okay, so somewhere over 150, definitely I think it was under 200, they actually can start being negatively affected by this income. Mm-hmm. So what'll happen is or everything's correlation and I theories at this point, but theories being potentially that the stress required to maintain those funds and that income maybe gets there. Because with money, we constantly have this emotional reaction like we don't have control. And if anything, Jack's been illustrating is his idea of believing people have expectations and that they have a lot more control than they realize. And so I always just say, you're going to grow into your income. So you might as well view savings as spending. So if you are in that scenario and you're at $75,000 and you all of a sudden jump to 85, you're either going to spend it or you're going to view it as spending and you're going to save $10,000.
All I have is my perspective, and what you guys are saying is kind of interesting because I recently got a raise and a promotion at my job, and as a creative, I always feel like you're underappreciated, and so you're paid less than you feel like your value is. And once I'm sort of now just coming to the idea that, okay, I'm getting paid what I feel like my value is, but at the same time, I can feel like the little itch that like, oh, but maybe I feel like I'm valued a little more right now, and when will that stop,
So yeah, kind of what you said, Raul, about kind of what sense of our value to a company. And then I think more recently I've been exposed more to the other side of like being like trying to lead a company and sell things and realizing the market doesn't care what you think your thing's worth. And so you're just trying to see, like Jared often says, how much money will people give you? So I get both of those. And there's a very different mindset on, like what is my value to a company versus what is a company's value to their consumer, and the way to think about it is just very different. And so, yeah, I don't have an answer, like you said. I'm just like, I'm seeing that the distinction between those ways of seeing value in money.
Sure. Yeah. And I think the consumer, and I most times I do feel like a consumer because we all should, but within that, it's hard to decide what the actual value is. I think in terms, because you have such emotion attached to whatever it is you're putting the value into. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not sure if everybody feels that way. And that's fascinating. Yeah. That you brought up, like that perspective on it. Because when I think of buying material things like that, like you said, a gold chain or nice car or whatever, like some people will see that as the American dream.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of that comes back to, I think this is what happens with a lot of people, is a lot of people go into the thinking of, well, at least I have. If you're in a lower middle income area, job, whatever, and you're content with your lower middle income house and everybody's fed and so on and so forth, maybe the $15,000 car when really your budget should be like a $7,000 car, but it's the car you want. That's the thing you can go back to in your own mind and kind of go, when things are bad, well, at least I have. And it gives you a sense of accomplishment for yourself. And I think that happens at every level, right? And
you think some of your clients are saying that, like, at least I have, even on the higher end?
I think everybody's doing that. I think absolutely everybody's doing that. I mean, the stories that are published between rich guys building bigger yachts to compete with one another, are ubiquitous. Like I don't think you can escape that entirely as a human, right? Because my absolutely just personal opinion, I don't have any research, but my opinion is that everybody everywhere is basically just going through the world telling themselves that they're all right. And that's sort of what existence is to a certain extent. And they do a lot of different things to do it. And then money, because it's the most liquid thing, gets used a lot towards those purposes.
This is for you particularly. In the study, which was cited quite a bit, is talking about financial advisors. So, and the crux of it is they were looking at the difference between financial advisors who are high expertise versus those with high benevolence. I mean, they show the emotional compassion towards their clients. And what they found was that in low emotional difficulty situations, that people were more willing to talk to the people with high expertise. Mm-hmm. But in high emotionally difficult decision making, they preferred talking to people with high benevolence. And overall, they found that customers were more confident of the accuracy of the predominantly benevolent providers than they were the predominantly expertise providers. So, any thoughts on the findings of that research?
I think that actually is consistent with a sort of bigger idea. Part of the thing that makes money so hard is because it is very numerate, but its
Define
value,
numerate for us.
it's very numerical, right?
Okay.
Like I can define it just as a number,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the things that's most easily defined for a lot of humans.
Mm-hmm.
But its value is very, very dynamic or varied.
Mm-hmm.
And so it means that you're in this constant tension on what is this enough? Is this not enough? And then my benchmarks change. What does it mean? Is it worth it? Do I have satisfaction? And I think that that's part of the reason that you have, and money, the number means different things at different times,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like the easy example is when you're young, you have $150 and it's like a king's ransom.
Right.
You don't have bills, you don't have whatever, right? And when you're older, you have $200,000 in retirement. And you're like, I don't know if that's going to get me through retirement.
Mm.
So I think the benevolence and expertise bit with financial advisors makes a lot of sense, because a lot of what advisors are doing or should be doing is trying to walk alongside their clients as they navigate what is a windy road.
Mm.
Because definitions change, feelings change, priorities change, values change, incomes change, expenses change. So sometimes what you need is the emotional part of the person to be solid. And sometimes what you need is the disciplined side of a person to be solid.
Mm.
And so I don't know. I suppose that having just heard that statistic, getting people's behavior to actually match what is best for them sometimes will require a lot of emotional work,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it will require just a lot of expertise, because they're willing to say whatever you say
Right.
and get to the right answer.
Yeah.
But I think it goes back and forth because of that, because all the stuff with money is variable.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's nothing more difficult. If anybody, I ever find myself consulting in any industry or any person, and they're talking about change,
Mm-hmm.
and then they introduce the ugly word behavioral change, I stop them, because a lot of times people think it's the easiest change because it just involves, well, I just have to talk to these people and
Turn
the
this on,
behavior
off.
changes,
Yeah.
on off switch,
Yeah.
no problem. I don't have to go buy $1 million in equipment. I don't have
Right.
to overhaul my phone system. I don't have to, I just have to get people to act different. There's nothing harder. So I always say, like, you'd much rather have to make a large investment.
Oh, yeah.
Behavioral changes
Yeah.
is the most difficult change to drive home.
Yeah. So people are more valuable than money in a business context. I mean, people are more valuable anyways, but like within a business context, human capital, and this is going to be even more true going into the future. Ironically, with the rise of AI, I think that human capital will become even more valuable as a part of the capital stack in corporations, because
Mm-hmm.
because they're irreplaceable.
Yeah.
What we do with financial planning is, you get a financial plan. So we put a ton of time together at the beginning of a relationship, get to know the person, understand the very pragmatic, what are your income, your expenses, where do you live, where do you come from, so on and so forth. Try to understand them emotionally too, how they relate to money, what their relationship with money is like. But then the real value in the plan is, once you put the plan together, is being able to come back to it every year.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can't see that you're either progressing or not progressing, then the plan had zero value.
Right.
It doesn't matter how much expertise was in there. It had zero value. It had absolutely no effect on the actual outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So we do it every year, try to come back and say, well, where were we? Because people aren't real good at relating to time either. 5 years goes by and they're like, wow, it's been 5 years. I didn't feel like that. Right. So you need these objective markers out there to be able to say, your behavior is not changing.
Mm-hmm.
Your behavior is changing, so on and so forth. And I hope that most financial planners do that too, that it's not just a product.
Mhm.
Here's your financial plan.
Right.
See you again in 5 years if you want to come back. But that it's a product that comes with a process to monitor whether or not the plan is being implemented and working.
Mhm. And then being able to emotionally process.
Yep.
So to find out what are the blockages, which are usually
And-
emotional
but, yeah.
than
And
cognitive.
But that's part of the reason the time factor is so important too, is because that like people don't change and understand the first time they're confronted with something.
Oh, for sure.
They have to get real comfortable with, oh, that is actually the reality. It's different than what I thought it was.
Mhm.
I am probably different than I thought I was. So being able to come back to a thing and then be keeping track.
Mhm.
We had this conversation last year. Do you want to continue this happening?
Right,
We've had this conversation for 3 years in a row. Do you want to continue to not be hitting your savings goals? Do you want to continue to feel like you don't have enough money? All of these sorts of things.
Right. To get at.
And you need the time because people just can't on a dime.
Things right towards the end there where I'm like, I want to open that Pandora's box. I
right.
want to open that
I know,
Pandora's box. I want to
yes.
open that Pandora's box, but we can't. But we will promise we'll be back. And we will have more of these conversations. Thank you for listening or watching It's Just Money. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If so, please subscribe so you don't miss out.
Also, leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have any suggestions for future episodes, please comment below.
But remember, it's just money.
Thanks for sticking around. Here's a clip from our next episode. A few that had a lot of resources and the many who had very little.
Does basically development and research stop because I will just go somewhere else where I do make the money.
But it kind of ties into the point what you were saying though in pharmaceuticals, like, are the rich making you poor? It kind of is if you're spending all of your money just to live